You know, America, the Marxist left and their media mouthpieces are very, very dangerous. I don't care what country you talk about. They're busy trying to topple legitimate governments and smear great statesmen, even during times of war. It's especially so in Israel, which I keep a very close eye on. And one of the absolute best people who cover this day by day is Carolyn Glick. You can follow Carolyn Glick, the Carolyn Glick Show on YouTube. That's spelled Caroline Glick Show on YouTube. She also writes for one of my favorite news sites, JNS. So, Carolyn, welcome. And it looks like we have yet another round of an effort to destroy Benjamin Netanyahu going on in the left in Israel. Is that correct?
It's absolutely true. You're right, and thanks for the introduction. You know, Mark, what we're seeing right now is a combination of things, but basically you see with Ukraine, you see it with the $230 million to the Palestinians, and with more sanctions on Israeli law-abiding citizens by this administration, and what they're doing at the UN is that they're trying to make it impossible for the Trump administration to break out of the straitjacket of the failed Middle East policy that the Biden administration has been pursuing for 4 years to such a disastrous end. And the key to everything from the Democrats' perspective and from the Israeli left's perspective is to oust Prime Minister Netanyahu before January 20th. And so they're working overtime with just this unbridled effort to open up crazy nut job criminal prosecutions and do all kinds of other things to take him out. And it's instructive for the incoming Trump administration as well, because the deep state in Israel and the United States are so enmeshed with one another that, you know, you basically look at what's happening in Israel and see what awaits the Trump administration beginning January 20th. And, you know, it's one of these things where you have these progressive leftists in all of these democracies all over in Latin America and Europe and in Israel and the United States that just have given up on democracy. And they're just progressive, they're hard leftists, and they use their bureaucratic powers. And either, you know, we all stand together to protect our democracies, or we're all going to hang on our own. And so it's really important for Americans to be watching what's happening in Israel right now.
And they've opened multiple new fronts. Let's get into some of this. Tell us.
Mm-hmm. So Netanyahu has been on trial for 4 years for these corruption trial charges that were laughable on their face. But the purpose was never really to put him in jail. It was to force him out of office. It's just lawfare. It's not really legal. So this joke of a trial has been going on for 4 years. The prosecution finally rested in August with all of the 3 charges that they have against him in a shambles. All of their star witnesses became witnesses for the defense on the witness stand, but they won't let go of it because the whole purpose is not necessarily to end the trial, it's to prolong it and to force him into a tighter and tighter straitjacket as a criminal defendant to make it impossible for him to govern. So now the defense is supposed to start, but here's the problem. We're at war. And the first witness for the defense is the prime minister himself. And you have about 21 hours of testimony a week over several weeks. And he said, look, can we postpone it for a couple of weeks? I'm the prime minister leading a war. Can't really make the time. And so they said, nope, we can't. You have to start testifying 20, 25 hours a week, every week for the next 3 weeks, starting next month. And if you don't, then we're going to declare you unfit to lead the country. That's what they're poised to do. That's what they're teeing it all up to do, is say, he can't be prime minister and a criminal defendant at the same time, so therefore we're going to force him out of office so that he can just be a criminal defendant. And so that's what they're trying to do. They're paralyzing his office with one political investigation after another. You have people in jail now for over a month being treated like terrorists.
Let's slow down on this. In that case, it's a media guy, right? And they're accusing him of leaking, and they threw him in prison.
No, he's a spokesperson. He's a military spokesperson. Yeah, and the military, which is part of the general staff of the army, which is very much part of the deep state. and they've been hiding information from the prime minister. And you had an NCO in intelligence who saw this information, which was absolutely necessary for the prime minister to see, relevant to the plight of the hostages. So he contacted the military spokesman, said, "Here, can you these are documents," and so they published them in Bild, the German newspaper, which showed that the Hamas leadership's internal documents said they didn't want to have a deal. They were using the hostages in order to destabilize the government, and that's it. They're not going to let anybody out. And so it was published, and the deep state went wild, and they have the NCO and the spokesman being treated like terrorists already for a month. I think they've been in and been denied counsel. They've not been allowed to meet with their attorneys. They're being held in solitary and just being treated like terrorists. And
let me ask you something. Who is locking up? The military? The civilian side? Can't see lawyers? Who's doing this?
The state prosecution and our version of the, sort of the FBI. It's called the Shin Bet. And it's very frightening. And the weird thing is that they don't even have the media. The media was drumming it up initially, but when the details of the case started coming out, and it was so obvious that this was a political pursuit and not a criminal one, even some of the hardened leftists in the media started turning against them, saying, "Why are they in jail?" And they don't care. They're like, they're out of control. They're not even thinking about the fact that the public is completely aghast at what's happening. They don't have anybody supporting them, and they're just continuing to pursue this because they're in for an inch, they're in for a mile, and it's scary. And then they have these frivolous investigations of some of the chief of staff of the prime minister and his media advisor, and it's all trying to force people to, turn on the prime minister, but they don't have anything to say against him, just like was the case with all three charges that he's on trial for. I mean, they've got nothing, but they don't care. And now they're actually totally just in a state of panic because they know that if Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump are in office together, then they're done. And so in the United States, their counterparts in the various organs of government are, very intent on seeing this happening. I mean, I saw Douglas Murray on Fox News a couple of weeks ago said that if the Biden administration had spent a fraction of the time trying to overthrow the prime minister of Netanyahu on trying to overthrow the regime in Iran, they would have been ousted from power 3 years ago.
I think you heard that Sunday on my show.
Is that right?
We're here with our friend Carolyn Glick. You can find her on the Carolyn Glick Show on YouTube and also on JNS, one of my favorite news sites. And she's telling us what's going on in the state of Israel and how the left there and the bureaucracy there and, like our intelligence and some of our military assets in our country are trying to destroy Donald Trump. They are definitely taking their third or fourth whack at the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu. It's really sick. And but the coordination is obvious, isn't it, Carolyn? I mean, now we have a UN vote coming up tomorrow. The United States is sitting on the fence. It's another anti-Israel vote. They've been withholding weapons. You point out, we've never seen this before, where another country, the United States, is projecting sanctions on citizens of Israel just because they support, Judea and Samaria and other things that this administration doesn't support. It's clearly coordinated, don't you think?
I think so. I mean, you had the protesters or rioters at the Hart Senate building in Washington today, working hand in glove with Senators Merkley and Van Hollen and Sanders, all calling for an arms embargo against Israel. And there is already a very significant partial arms embargo on Israel that's making it difficult to prosecute the war to victory. Because of the constraints on arms that the United States has placed on Israel and a lot of other constraints that they placed on Israel that intentionally to subvert the war effort. And so that's bad enough. But yeah, I mean, we also saw the collusion between these rioters. They tried to kill the prime minister by throwing incendiary devices at his house in Caesarea. Like last week on Saturday night, and There was another attempt to do that at his apartment in Jerusalem the week before, and it's very frightening. And then, you had Tony Blinken, right? In one of his many visits to Israel, and several of his visits to Israel, he met with the leaders of these riots that are trying to oust the government from power. He had his motorcade just by chance drive through their protests, and then he got out and spoke and everything. And this was an open demonstration calling for the overthrow of the government, and there's a Secretary of State just happened by. And so, those are just things that you see, and the things that you don't see are, of course, much bigger. I'm sure that if we had the visitor logs, at the State Department and the White House, and, we would discover lots of interesting things. But there's an enmeshment of the two deep states in the United States and in Israel. And, you see it all over the place. And so that's why the whole thing is disturbing. Look, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance and a lot of members of their team, they've made clear they don't want to have never-ending wars that the United States is involved in the Middle East. And the way to extricate the United States from these sorts of things is to stand by Israel and support us as we move towards absolute victory against Hamas, against Hezbollah, and rearrange the strategic architecture of the Middle East in a way that is stabilizing rather than destabilizing, as it's been for the past, couple of decades with Iran on the rise with the support of the Democratic Party. So, what they're trying to do is block that. And when Israel wins this war, the United States' interests are going to be secure, and the need for U.S. forces to be operating in the region is going to be vastly diminished because you have your ally there that's standing 20 stories high. So you're looking at a situation where the objective that the incoming Trump administration has set for itself is entirely wrapped up in two things. One is Netanyahu remaining in power because he's the man for the job, and he doesn't have any easy replacement today at all. And two, that he is able to complete the mission of winning this war. And when that happens, the United States is in a completely different strategic reality in the Middle East that's stable and that doesn't require it to be putting forces in there all the time, trying to keep the peace. That's really the truth. So,
all right, let me ask you this before we go here. But Netanyahu is very, very popular right now in Israel, is he not?
He's more popular than he's been in a long, long time. And the weird thing, and the reason why you see how desperate this effort to oust him is, the more that they do it, the more popular he is. Each week he's rising in the polls by another Knesset seat and another Knesset seat and another Knesset seat. He's like bigger than twice the second largest party. So that's what I'm saying. They're not for democracy. They need to destroy democracy in order to retain their power and privilege, and that's what's so distressing. And obviously you experience it here also.
So if people want to keep following you and following this, where do they go?
Well, they can follow me at Twitter. It's just, my name, my handle, and they can follow me at my show, which is three days a week, the Carolyn Glick Show, on YouTube and all the other, Spotify, all of them. They want to listen. And they can read me at JNS and on my website, which I do have to update, CarolynGlick.com. And whenever you have me on the Mark Levin Show.
There you go. Well, we love to have you on.
I love being on.
Every now and then when somebody contacts me, I'm in a bad mood. And unfortunately, she contacted me. I was in a bad mood. It just depends on what's going on, Carolyn, But anyway, thank you. We love having you.
Always lots of news in Israel. Anytime you want an update, I'm your gal.
You got it. That's our gal, Carolyn, America. There she is. God bless you, my friend, and hang in there.
Thanks so much.
All right. You take care. She's the best. She really is. Brilliant.